Marcus and Diana were hired 11 days apart into the exact same job title, and their yearly pay differs by roughly $400. Each of them has $96,500 parked in savings. On paper, they are basically financial twins. In March, Marcus buys a house, 3 bedrooms, a driveway that badly needs resealing, and a kitchen the listing agent described as full of potential. In real estate language, that means the dishwasher is more rumor than reality. Diana signs a 12-month lease 4 blocks away, in a house that is nearly identical to his. Nobody ever throws a party to celebrate a lease. In real estate language, that means the dishwasher is more rumor than reality. Diana signs a 12-month lease 4 blocks away, in a house that is nearly identical to his. Nobody ever throws a party to celebrate a lease. And if you are currently running this exact math on your own life, the answer should genuinely worry you, but that is not even the surprising part yet. Change a single number in this comparison, a number that neither of them controls and that literally no one alive can predict, and Marcus ends up $700,000 ahead instead. My name is Yank, and I have spent an embarrassing number of nights building spreadsheets that dismantle my own opinions. If anyone has ever told you renting is the same as setting money on fire, hit subscribe and leave a like, because today we are running this comparison honestly from both sides, including the parts that make my own argument look shaky. Let's begin with the uncomfortable truth: almost everyone runs this comparison wrong. People compare a rent check to a mortgage payment, notice that the mortgage builds equity, and stop thinking right there. That comparison is worthless. If anyone has ever told you renting is the same as setting money on fire, hit subscribe and leave a like, because today we are running this comparison honestly from both sides, including the parts that make my own argument look shaky. Let's begin with the uncomfortable truth: almost everyone runs this comparison wrong. People compare a rent check to a mortgage payment, notice that the mortgage builds equity, and stop thinking right there. That comparison is worthless. None of that turns into equity. It evaporates exactly the way rent does, just through a fancier sounding pipe. So the actual question was never rent versus mortgage. It's whose money is disappearing faster, and what the other person is doing with the leftover difference. Everything from here forward is just arithmetic layered on top of that single idea. Here's where things stand as of this recording. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate sits around 5.95%. The median existing home just sold for $482,500, an all-time record. Realtor.com crunched the numbers this past March. Owning a starter home runs about $3,120 a month, while renting something comparable runs $2,150. Owning costs 55% more for the same roof over your head. And here's the part that genuinely stopped me: renting is currently cheaper on a monthly basis in 49 out of the 50 largest metro areas in the country. Not most of them. 49 out of 50. How does that even happen? Record high prices and stubbornly high rates, arriving at the same time. That gap is not normal. Historically, the premium for owning is small, and sometimes it doesn't exist at all. So should you just wait it out? Fannie Mae projects rates around 5.8% through next year. The Mortgage Bankers Association projects 5.9%. Nobody is forecasting a rate that starts with a 4. Waiting around for 2021 to return isn't a strategy, it's a hobby. So let's stop watching Marcus from the sidelines and put you directly in his shoes. You buy his house for $482,500, with a payment you could recite from memory and a true cost you've never once actually calculated. You put 20% down, which is $96,500 gone from savings into a wall. You borrow $386,000 at 5.95%, and your principal and interest payment lands at $2,330 a month. That's the number you tell people. That's the number printed on your pre-approval letter. That's the number you've emotionally accepted as reality. Then real life shows up with an invoice. Property taxes at roughly 1% nationally add about $402 a month. Insurance adds another $275. Maintenance, which Harvard pegs at 1 to 2% of home value per year, adds around $402 whether or not anything actually breaks. Bankrate found the average homeowner spends $21,400 a year on everything that isn't the mortgage. So your real monthly cost isn't $2,330. It's $3,382. You're off by $1,079 a month, which is roughly the entire amount you had budgeted for simply existing. And those side costs are the ones behaving badly. Insurance is up about 62% since 2021, 3 times the rate of inflation. In Florida, the average premium is projected at $9,700. Property taxes rose 12% nationally over 2 years, because the moment your home's value climbs, the county notices immediately. Funny how that only seems to work in one direction. Now you're thinking, sure, but I'm building equity with every single payment, right? This is where I have to show you the least popular chart in personal finance. Over 30 years, you will pay $443,000 in interest on a $386,000 loan. You pay an extra 115% of the house's price to the bank on top of the house's actual price, for the privilege of not paying the whole thing today. And it's front-loaded. In your first 10 years of payments, roughly 81% of every dollar goes straight to interest. After a decade of never once missing a payment, you'll have knocked about $57,000 off the balance. 10 years. $57,000 of progress. That is not a wealth-building machine. That is a very slow subscription service that happens to come with a lawn. And no, the mortgage interest deduction will not rescue you. It's the most confidently cited benefit that almost nobody actually receives. After the 2017 tax law nearly doubled the standard deduction, the share of filers who itemize collapsed from 31% to under 10%. You take the standard deduction like everyone else does, which means your deduction is worth exactly nothing. It's a benefit that mostly exists at barbecues. So now let's be equally tough on Diana, because her side has a catch that's honestly bigger than his. Remember, she's 4 blocks from Marcus's front door. She rents the comparable house for $2,150 a month. She pays about $200 a year for renter's insurance and nothing for the water heater that dies on her in February. When her roof leaks, she makes a phone call. You have to make a decision. But renting only wins if Diana does the boring, unglamorous thing. And this is the entire ballgame. She has to take the $96,500 she didn't spend, plus the closing costs she avoided, plus the $1,079 monthly gap between her rent and your true cost, and invest every bit of it into index funds every single month, forever, without ever touching it. Most renters do not do this. They spend the difference. And if Diana spends it, this entire video falls apart and you win by a landslide, because your mortgage forces you to save whether you feel like it or not. Amortization does not care about your mood. That is the single strongest argument for buying that exists, and it has nothing to do with real estate itself. A mortgage is essentially a savings account that yells at you. So let's assume Diana actually is disciplined. We'll use 7% investment returns, 3% home appreciation, 3% rent growth, and 7% selling costs. Hold on to those assumptions, because a woman named Renee in Cleveland is going to break every single one of them later. By year 3, Marcus's old house, now his, is worth $527,000, which feels amazing right up until you subtract the mortgage balance and the cost of selling. Your real net position comes out to about $121,000. Diana's portfolio, meanwhile, sits at about $162,000. She's ahead of you by $41,000. By year 10, you've replaced a water heater, a roof, and most of your weekends. You're sitting at $292,000. Diana is at $345,000. The gap is $53,000. 7 more years of your life, and the gap only moved by about $6,000, which tells you something important: this is not a blowout. It's a tie game being decided entirely by assumptions. And I'm about to change one of them. But numbers on a screen aren't really how this decision gets experienced. So let me translate it into terms you'll actually feel. Being $1,079 off on your monthly cost doesn't look like a spreadsheet error. It looks like getting the HVAC quote on a Tuesday and quietly canceling the trip you promised your kid back in March. It looks like a roof estimate for $11,000 and the words, "We'll figure it out," said out loud to nobody in particular. It looks like standing in your own driveway doing mental math about whether the water heater can survive one more winter. It looks like being one broken appliance away from wiping out your emergency fund, every single month, for 11 years straight. And Diana's version isn't free either. Hers looks like a landlord who refuses to replace the dishwasher. It looks like painting a wall she doesn't even own. It looks like an email in February with the subject line, "Lease renewal," and the 60 seconds before she opens it. It looks like being told, very politely, that her rent is going up $200 because that's simply what the market says. And there being no version of this where she's allowed to say no. Neither of them is comfortable. They're just uncomfortable in completely different currencies. Then your phone rings. Year 6, a job offer in another state, $20,000 more a year. Diana gives 30 days notice, loses her deposit, and rents a moving truck. You have a very different experience. Selling costs run 6 to 9% of your home's value once you count commissions, transfer taxes, and buyer concessions. And yes, that famous lawsuit settlement was supposed to fix real estate commissions. 2/3 of agents reported no meaningful change. $418 million in settlement money essentially bought the industry a brand new form to sign. So you owe roughly $38,500 just to walk out of a house you owned for 6 years, a house whose loan balance moved by only $31,000 in that time. You didn't lose money on the house. You lost it on the doors. So the single most important variable in this entire equation isn't interest rates, and it isn't home prices. It's time. Nationally, you need 5 to 7 years in a home before buying beats renting, purely because transaction costs are brutal on both ends. And here's the reassuring half of the story, since I promised you both directions. The median American home seller has now owned their home for 11 years. Today's buyers expect to stay for 15. Most people who buy a house are not you in year 6. They are you in year 20. And you, in year 20, are doing just fine. So watch what happens when nobody moves. Run it out 30 years. Diana, the disciplined investor, ends up with about $1.4 million. You end up with about $1.3 million. She still wins, barely, after 30 years of mowing the lawn, ahead by roughly the price of a used sedan. Then year 31 arrives, and your mortgage is finally gone. Diana's rent, after 3 decades of 3% annual increases, is about $5,800 a month, and it keeps climbing until she dies. Every spring she opens an envelope telling her what her home now costs. You stop getting that envelope entirely. Your cost drops down to just taxes, insurance, and upkeep, about $2,250. You're living for less than half of what she pays, in a house nobody can ever ask you to leave. That's what people actually mean when they say a home isn't an investment. It's a hedge. You didn't out-earn Diana. You bought your way out of the rental market permanently, which matters enormously if you plan to retire on a fixed income, and most of us do. This is also why the net worth statistics look so lopsided. The Federal Reserve found the median homeowner has a net worth around $396,000, versus $10,400 for the median renter, 38 times more. But everyone quotes that number dishonestly. It isn't proof that houses create wealth. It's largely selection bias, and that statistic is doing a lot of quiet work to avoid mentioning that wealthier people simply buy more houses. The house did play a part, mostly by forcing people to save whether they wanted to or not. Okay, here's the number I promised you 90 seconds ago. Every single projection I just walked you through assumed home prices rise 3% a year. Change that assumption to 5%, and everything flips. You pass Diana in year 5 and finish $700,000 ahead of her. Change it to 0%, and she beats you by $650,000. 2 percentage points. That's the entire argument, and it's a number that literally nobody on earth can forecast, including every person who will confidently tell you they can. So what does history actually say? Robert Shiller built the longest home price data set that exists, stretching back to 1890. After adjusting for inflation, American home prices have appreciated about 0.5% per year over more than a century. That's not really an asset class. That's a savings account with a roof and a property tax bill attached. The counterpoint, and it's a solid one, is that appreciation isn't actually where housing's return comes from. The best long-run study, covering 16 countries over 145 years, found that housing's total real return runs about 7%, fully competitive with stocks. But almost all of that return comes from rent, either the rent you collect or the rent you avoid paying, not from the price going up. So when someone quotes you 7% while also promising you appreciation on top of it, they're counting the same dollar twice and hoping you won't notice. Which brings us to the thing that actually decides this for you, and it has nothing to do with your discipline or your personality. It's your zip code. Take Renee in Cleveland. She buys a house for $135,000. Her total monthly cost, everything included, comes to about $1,050. Renting that same house would run her $1,400. Renee is cash flow positive from day 1, breaks even by year 3, and by year 10 she's roughly $104,000 ahead of where renting would have left her. Now move Renee to San Jose. Same person, same job, same discipline. A comparable home there costs $1.7 million. Owning it runs about $12,800 a month, while renting it runs $6,200. That gap, invested, puts her $400,000 ahead by year 5 and over $800,000 ahead by year 10. There is no version of that math where buying wins early. Renee didn't change. Her zip code did. So here's the number you actually need. And you can calculate it tonight in about 40 seconds. Take the price of the house you want and divide it by 12 months of rent on something comparable. Under 15, buying is usually right for you. Over 25, renting and investing almost always wins. Cleveland runs around 10. San Jose runs over 30. Marcus sits at 18.7, which is exactly why his 10-year gap was $53,000 instead of $800,000. He's sitting right on the fence line, which is the single worst place to stand. And if you've been quietly running this math on yourself and concluding that you're just bad with money, let me show you what you're actually up against. Since 2000, median household income is up about 92%. Median home prices are up 177%. The median home now costs roughly 6 times median income. Back in the 90s, it was 3.2 times. If prices had simply tracked incomes, the house you're looking at would cost around $257,000 instead of nearly $500,000. The country is somewhere between 1 and 5 million housing units short. Starter homes under 1,400 square feet fell from about 35% of new construction in 1976 to around 10% today. Builders quietly stopped building the exact house you're trying to buy. And half of all outstanding mortgages carry a rate below 4%. Those homeowners are never selling, and honestly, you wouldn't either. The Federal Housing Finance Agency found this lock-in effect alone pushed prices up 5.7%. The market didn't just get expensive. It got frozen, with everyone you'd need to buy from standing safely on the inside. Which is why the median first-time buyer in America is now 41 years old, not 30. 41, an all-time record. And the kind of record nobody holds a ceremony for. First-time buyers now make up 21% of the market, also a record, in the wrong direction. And nearly 43 million American households now spend more than 30% of their income on housing, the most ever recorded. So were Marcus and Diana ever really choosing between two good options? No. They were choosing which flavor of a bad deal fit their life better. And so are you. Diana isn't winning because she's clever. Marcus isn't losing because he's reckless. All three of you are standing in a market that stopped making sense about 15 years before any of you had a down payment saved up. You didn't cause this. It was done to you slowly, by zoning boards, interest rate policy, and 20 years of not building enough houses. By the way, I opened a school community where I break down how to build income streams that don't depend on any of this, including how to start and scale a faceless YouTube channel from zero. Link is below. Back to it. So here is the honest verdict, and it isn't really a verdict at all. Be like Renee. If three things are true at once: you're staying at least 7 years with real confidence, not just a feeling, your city's price-to-rent ratio is under 15, and your down payment is large enough that private mortgage insurance isn't quietly bleeding you every year until you hit 78% loan-to-value, which usually takes 7 or 8 years of paying a monthly fee for the crime of not already being rich. Be like Diana if any one of those three things is false. Rent if there's a real chance you move within 5 years. Rent if you're in San Jose, San Francisco, Seattle, Los Angeles, Austin, or Denver, where ratios sit above 25. And if you know, honestly, that you will never actually invest the difference, then buy for that exact reason. Know which of these two people you actually are, and notice this before you decide. 63% of recent buyers report at least one regret, with unexpected maintenance topping the list. Yet 70% say they'd do it again. Both things are true at once. Owning a home is frequently the correct financial decision and frequently a worse day-to-day experience than anybody admits at the housewarming party. So stop treating this like a character test. Renting is not immaturity. Owning is not adulthood. They are simply two different financing structures for the exact same human need, which is a door that locks. The people who get destroyed here are not renters and they are not owners. They are the people who bought a house they could barely afford, in a city they were always going to leave, because someone once told them they were throwing money away. That single sentence has cost Americans more than almost any other sentence in personal finance. Quick reminder, I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. Run your own numbers, ideally tonight, with your actual property tax bill plugged in. And if this reframed anything for you, that school community link is below. So here's the question I'll leave you with. It isn't, can I afford the payment, because your bank will happily answer that one wrong for you. The real question is this. If you knew for certain that this house would be worth exactly what you paid for it in 10 years, not a single dollar more, would you still want to live in it? If the answer is yes, buy the house. You're buying a life, and the math will probably follow. If the answer is no, you are never buying a home. You are buying a bet, and there are much cheaper places to gamble.